The Congress is in recess for a couple of weeks, so we asked Congressman John Carney to join us as first person this week. Congressman Carney, thank you for joining us.
Great to be here.
One of the big issues in Washington over the last couple of weeks actually deals with something that was passed before you got to D.C., health care. What are your thoughts on sort of the oral arguments before the Supreme Court?
Yeah, well, I thought the oral arguments were very interesting. In fact, one day I was actually driving back from Washington and listened to the retape of the argument for about two hours. Fascinating argument about the constitutionality of the individual mandate. My own view, I think, is, given my long experience here in Delaware, is if the individual mandate fails, that is, that it's deemed not to be constitutional, then most of the other parts of the legislation, I think, fall apart, because a big part of the funding depends on getting more people to be enrolled, having insurance and paying premiums. So my approach has always been, since elected in 2010, is to find ways to fix and make the legislation work. Look, the reality is we need to make sure that we bring costs of healthcare down, healthcare premiums, and to make sure more people have access to healthcare and health insurance. So that should be our goal, and we ought to keep that in mind.
Are there sort of whispers among Democrats in Congress about the contingency plans? I know that President Obama said there's no contingency plan.
Yeah, not really. There hasn't been that kind of discussion, and I think the expectation was that most people had was that that this was something that was passed by Congress and that it was solid, and there wasn't going to be any that it wouldn't be overturned. And of course, it seemed like there were a lot of skeptical judges as they heard the testimony there. So we'll have to see what happens and take it from there. But I think, again, we need to keep our eye on the ball, bring healthcare costs down, get better results, and make sure more people have access to quality health care.
Do you have a feeling which way it's going to go?
I have a feeling that, as in most things, that they might split the baby a little bit, and maybe say that the mandate is not constitutional, but the rest of the law would stay in place. And then you have some really significant and serious decisions to make on how to make it work, because I'm not sure that it works, all the different pieces, without that the mandate part of it.
All right, we'll watch closely. The House passed a budget sort of on a technicality, but what's your thought of the measure pushed through by Congressman Ryan?
Well, I was very disappointed. I think the Ryan budget is not really balanced. Look, there's going to have to be sacrifice that everybody has to make if we're going to get our budget and our fiscal situation in order, and in a budget that cuts significantly programs for the poor, and at the same time gives significant tax cuts for people of significant means. I mean, that just doesn't seem fair to me. I voted for two budgets, one of which was the only bipartisan budget that was offered, and unfortunately we were only able to get 38 votes. So I think that's an indication of how much work there is that needs to be done. The challenge, I think, is to do something that puts us on a fiscal course to get our budgets balanced in the future, but doesn't really negatively impact the economy in the short term. At the end of this year, we have what's being called a fiscal cliff coming up, where the Bush tax cuts would expire and the automatic budget cuts would kick in. That would take about $3 trillion out of the economy and send us back into a recession. That's not a good thing. Extending all those tax cuts and taking away the automatic spending cuts, that would be bad as well. So somehow Democrats and Republicans are going to have to come together and develop a balanced approach to that fiscal problem.
You've been working on a number of proposals trying to get businesses, small businesses going and creating jobs. One in particular deals with emerging growth companies. Talk us through how that works.
So actually that's, for me, one of the things that we can be optimistic about. This was an effort where Democrats and Republicans worked together, where the Obama administration through the Treasury Department worked with the private sector to develop a series of ideas to encourage small emerging growth companies to, in the case of our bill, to do an initial public offering. That is to access capital through the public markets. And it passed out of committee. It was very bipartisan. Steve Fincher, my co-sponsor, Republican freshman in the House, and I sponsored the bill. Passed committee 54-1 and passed out of the House with all the other components that the House leadership added to it. With 390 votes, so a very bipartisan effort. it will help small companies create jobs, and that's our #1 priority now. You saw Democrats and Republicans working together. The House and the Senate stepped up to the plate and sent this legislation to the president, and he intends to sign it.
Is it sort of a little bit about balancing over-regulation and under-regulation?
That's a very good way to put it, and it's a common sense, reasonable approach. Actually, when it got over to the Senate, all the public debate I didn't recognize because it was not accurate. Basically, those who were expressing their opposition to the bill were doing so basically assuming that the bill eliminated completely some of these regulations. It doesn't do that. It phases them in. It takes kind of a common sense approach. It phases them in so that small companies, small businesses can grow into their ability financially and otherwise to manage those regulations. So it doesn't completely exempt some of the regulations that were identified by Treasury and others. It also should help Delaware because most companies are incorporated in Delaware, and when they go to an IPO and grow, they end up, as it turns out, paying more in corporate franchise fees to the state of Delaware. So this should encourage that kind of activity.
Sort of a win-win.
It's a win-win-win, and it was done in a bipartisan way. It's a sign of to be optimistic about.
Next Thursday, the 12th, you're doing a big event for residents to learn more about consumer fraud and I guess how to protect themselves from that.
Yeah, so we're bringing the FTC in to do 2 events, one in Georgetown at the Cheer Center and one up here in Newcastle County, really hoping to have them make presentations to the public to warn them about certain consumer fraud things, identity theft, protection from internet scams, that type of thing. And so we're very hopeful that people will come out, that they'll avail themselves of this information and help prevent getting taken by a scam artist.
We talked politics a little bit at the beginning with health care. You are up for re-election this fall. How do you approach it? Is it different than it was 2 years ago? Obviously, because you've had the past 2 years under your belt, you approach the campaign process differently?
Yeah, it's very different. It's mainly different because now I'm doing the job. And so I think the best way to run for office is to do the job effectively. And I'm doing it in the way that I told people that I would. You know, trying to work with Republicans, work across the aisle to solve problems, address the challenges that we face as a country, primarily helping businesses create jobs. We just had this jobs bill passed and signed by the president. So that's, I think, just continuing to do that and do the job shows people that you're actually doing what you said you were going to do, and that's the way I'm going to approach it. The campaign really hasn't ramped up yet, although there's the behind-the-scenes type thing going on. There's a primary on the Republican side at the moment, so we'll wait and see how that gets sorted out and then engage hard in the fall.
And thank you to John Carney, Delaware's lone representative in the U.S. House, for joining us on First Person this week.